respiratory system. All living organisms consume nutrients to fulfill their energy needs. This energy is produced in the cells using the food we eat and the oxygen we inhale. The process of releasing energy using these nutrients is accomplished through a defined system present in our body known as respiratory system. The system is located in the thorax region of our body. With the help of this system, the cells are able to obtain the energy needed for all life processes. Efforts to release the energy by this system is broken down into different stages: breathing, exchange of gases, and cellular respiration. The difference between breathing and cellular respiration is that breathing is a process of taking in oxygen and expelling carbon dioxide. Or we may say breathing is the physical act of inhaling and exhaling. Through breathing, we are able to move air in and out of the lungs. Once the gases are exchanged, breathing also serves the purpose of removing a waste gas like carbon dioxide. Cellular respiration is the sum of chemical reactions that happens in the cells using the inhaled oxygen and glucose obtained as nutrients, resulting in the release of energy. Overall, respiration is the sum total of all physical processes and chemical reactions to produce energy using inhaled oxygen. The human respiratory system consists of lungs and tubes associated with the lungs. It is supported by the diaphragm. The respiratory tract starts with the nostrils, which lead into nasal cavity. The nasal cavity is lined with the epithelial tissue containing blood vessels that help in warming up the air and secretes mucus, which further filters the air. The nasal cavity meets the pharynx at the back of the nose and mouth. The pharynx is also called the throat. From here, the passage bifurcates into the trachea and esophagus. The trachea is also known as the windpipe. As we studied in the digestive system, the epiglottis closes off the trachea when we swallow. Below the epiglottis is the larynx or voice box. The larynx is lined by two vocal cords that stretch across it. The vocal cords vibrate to produce sounds which result in speech. The trachea or windpipe is made up of muscles and elastic fibers with rings of cartilage. The cartilage prevents the tube of the trachea from collapsing. The trachea divides itself in two tubes, each known as bronchus, one entering the left and the other entering the right lung. The lungs are made up of spongy elastic tissues that allow them to inflate and deflate without losing the shape. We have two lungs, with the left being divided into two lobes and the right into three lobes. The lungs are covered by two-layered serous sac called pleura, parietal pleuron and visceral pleuron. The fluid filling the spaces is called pleural fluid. It provides frictionless movement to the lungs apart from protecting them from mechanical shock. Once inside the lungs, the bronchi split in several ways, forming smaller branches. Further divisions of the bronchi eventually lead to tiny tubes called bronchioles. Bronchioles lead to tiny air sacs known as alveoli. Bronchioles lead to tiny air sacs known as alveoli through alveolar ducts. The alveoli are richly supplied with blood capillaries. The alveolar duct deposits the air in the thin-walled alveoli or alveolar sacs. Gaseous exchange takes place in blood flowing through these capillaries. Respiration starts with breathing. Breathing makes inhalation and exhalation possible. The muscular diaphragm separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. As the diaphragm contracts and relaxes, breathing takes place. When our diaphragm moves down, we breathe in. Similarly, when the diaphragm moves up, we breathe out. The work of breathing is done by the diaphragm and the muscles present between the ribs. A set of muscles present between the ribs acts together to change the size of the chest cavity. The muscles attached to our ribs encircle the lungs and the chest cavity. Let us begin with inhalation. During the intake of air, these muscles raise the lower ribs up and out, thus increasing the dimensions of the thorax. Air is drawn into the lungs as a result of the combined expansion of the rib cage. As the diaphragm contracts, it increases the length and diameter of the chest cavity and thus expands the lungs. During exhalation, the muscles present between the ribs bring them down and in, thus decreasing the chest volume. The diaphragm rises, pulls the rib cage further inwards and hence decreasing the volume of the lungs. All this creates high pressure in the lungs, hence air is pushed out of the lungs. The diaphragm and the ribs, with the muscles present between the ribs, work together to help you breathe. The goal of breathing is to deliver oxygen to the body and to take away carbon dioxide. Thus, breathing consists of two processes: inhalation and exhalation. Breathing is an involuntary action, but its rate is controlled by the respiratory center in the brain. Under normal conditions, the rate of breathing is 15 to 18 times per minute. During vigorous exercise, the demand for oxygen increases the rate by about 20 to 25 times per minute. By now, we know that breathing is the first stage in respiration. If we follow the breathed-in air that enters the nasal cavity through nostrils, cilia lining the nasal cavity move back and forth, blocking the dirt that comes in with the air. From here, the air enters the trachea, which is also known as the windpipe. After passing through bronchi and bronchioles, the air reaches alveoli. At the alveoli, the second part of respiration, the exchange of gases takes place. Each alveolar sac is surrounded by blood capillaries. Gaseous exchange occurs between the air that reaches the alveoli and the surrounding blood capillaries. oxygen diffuses across the alveolar wall and enters the bloodstream, while carbon dioxide diffuses from the blood to the alveoli. Once in the bloodstream, oxygen gets picked up by the hemoglobin present in red blood cells. Due to the difference in concentration, the gases get exchanged between alveoli and the blood passing through the capillaries. Carbon dioxide that reaches into the alveoli is breathed out of the body through the same route along with the other constituents of air. The percentage of carbon dioxide in the inhaled air is 0.4% and exhaled air is 4%. The most common problem of the respiratory system are asthma, bronchitis, and emphysema. Asthma is a lung disease that causes tubes present in the respiratory system to become tightened and narrow. It is often triggered by irritants in the air such as cigarette smoke, chemicals, pollen grains, etc. The lining of the bronchial tubes swell, causing the airwaves to narrow and reducing the flow of air in and out of the lungs. Bronchitis, a common illness where the membranes lining of the larger bronchial tubes become inflamed and an excessive amount of mucus is produced. The person develops a bad cough and tries to get rid of the mucus. Cigarette smoking is a major cause of chronic bronchitis in teens. Long-term smoking often causes emphysema, and although it is rarely seen in kids and teens, but its roots develop in young age over the years of smoking. In emphysema, the lungs produce an excessive amount of mucus and the alveoli become damaged. It becomes difficult to breathe and enough oxygen does not reach into the blood.
Heredity. Reproduction is an essential life process which not only helps in survival of species but also helps in continuity of that race. Living organisms usually reproduce through sexual as well as asexual means. In asexually reproducing organisms, all the genes come from a single parent by the process of mitosis. In such cases, offspring are normally genetically identical to the parent. In sexually reproducing organisms, the new individual receives half of the genetic information from its mother and half from its father. Sexually produced offspring resemble but are not identical to either of their parents. Since the beginning of human history, people have wondered how traits are inherited from one generation to the next. Although children often look more like one parent than the other, most offspring show a blend of the characteristics of both parents. The passing of traits from parents to child is possible through heredity. Heredity is the passing of traits to offspring from its parents or ancestor. In this topic, you will learn about how heredity works. Your body is made up of trillions of cells. Each cell has a nucleus. The nucleus of a cell contains chromosomes that carry genetic information. The number of chromosomes is constant for all individuals in a species, and each one of them has a fixed and equal number of chromosomes. This number varies from species to species. A dog has 39 pairs of chromosomes. The elephant has 28 pairs, whereas the pig has 38 or 19 pairs, while the mosquito only has 6 or 3 pairs. Human cells have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Chromosomes are made from long, coiled molecules of DNA. DNA contains genetic information which is carried from the parent to the offsprings. Heredity is the passing on of characteristics from one generation to the next. Heredity may be defined as the transmission of characteristics through generations. The characteristics include all physical, physiological, and psychological characteristics in organisms. All these characteristics are called traits. There are some factors that control the inheritance of all traits. These factors are present in pairs and are known as genes. A gene is nothing but a segment of DNA that codes for the synthesis of a specific protein which controls the expression of a particular characteristic in an individual. Thus, a gene is the basic unit of heredity found on a chromosome. Let us learn about some terms which are used frequently when we discuss about heredity. Alleles. Alleles are different forms of the same gene. Genes are tiny biochemical units of DNA in each cell that determine particular hereditary traits. Although an individual gene codes for a specific physical trait, it exists in two forms or alleles. One allele for every gene is inherited from each of that organism's parents. Means one from father and the other from mother. For example, gene for the color of a flower is expressed by two of its alleles. Allele for purple flower, allele for white flower. Such state when each parent provides a different allele of a given gene, the offspring is referred to as heterozygous. In some cases, both parents provide the same type of allele for that particular characteristic. For example, alleles contributed by both the parents are same. Means both the alleles are for purple color. Such state is referred to as homozygous for that trait. Allele. As you have already understood that allele is one of a pair of alternative forms of a gene occurring at a given place or locus on a chromosome. Alleles produce phenotypes, means Physical versions of a trait. Dominant allele. Gene which is always expressed when it is present, regardless of whether it is homozygous or heterozygous for a particular inherited trait. Such allele is expressed by English letter in uppercase. Say capital T for tallness. This means that the trait of tallness is expressed even when allele from a single parent is present in the offspring. Recessive allele. Gene that is expressed in its phenotype only if it is present in homozygous state is known as recessive allele. Such allele is expressed by English letter in lower case. Say small t for dwarfness. The trait of dwarfness is expressed only when alleles from both the parents is present in the offspring. Let us understand the concept of homozygous and heterozygous. Imagine a situation where a woman who is a hybrid or heterozygous for tall means she has one allele for tallness and one for shortness, marries a man who has homozygous alleles for shortness. Physically, she is tall because T is dominant and masks the allele for shortness, and he is short because he has homozygous alleles for shortness. Half of their offspring will therefore be pure short, and half will be tall hybrids, and no one will be homozygous for tallness. This means that the parents have a 2/4 or 50% chance of having tall children and a 2/4 or 50% chance of having short children. This is a 1:1 ratio. Sometimes two genes will be codominant, that is, neither masks the other. An example is skin color. The child of a dark-skinned and fair-skinned parents will be a mixture of the two, and his color skin may come out somewhere between parent skin colors. Breeding the red genariums with white genariums gives genarium with mixed color, that is, pink flowers. Genotype is the underlying genetic makeup of a trait. Phenotype is the observable appearance of that trait. The term is also used for overall genetic makeup of an individual. The term is also used for the overall appearance of an individual. Genotype is an organism's full hereditary information, whereas phenotype is organism's actual observed properties or his appearance. An organism's phenotype is all of its observable characteristics which are influenced both by its genotype and by the environment. For example, parents with black hair will likely give birth to children with black hair, just as parents with long noses will have kids with long noses. Once in a while, though, this doesn't work and parents with black hair will give birth to a blonde. The phenotype is a mixed form. This discrepancy can be explained by genetic variation. Genetic variation refers to the differences in inherited traits that exist among the members of a species. In such cases, the progeny differs in its features and overall appearance from both the parents.